Hello, MFA. Before we welcome in the following presentation, I want you all to shut your eyes and indulge us in an experience. Imagine what I'm saying as if you're watching a movie. Visualize the people. Feel your senses take over. Follow my voice. You're lying in bed, dreaming peacefully. Suddenly, you wake up and realize today is MFA X and you're meant to be at the airport. You leap out of bed, grab everything you need, and rush out the door. You make it, only to realize your flight has been delayed. While waiting, you notice an out-of-home ad featuring a parent making sandwiches, and you think, how original. Time to board. You show the air staff your ticket, and the pilot looks at you personally welcoming you on board. Pretty special. Now, fast forward. You've landed. You grab a taxi to your hotel. The driver is listening to the radio. You catch their eye and ask to turn it up. You arrive at the hotel and are stuck behind a couple, clearly checking in on a honeymoon, embracing in what can only be described as an elaborate PDA. You finally grab your room key and rush to MFA X. And it is pumping. You scan the crowd looking for your friends when the CEO of the biggest media company stares straight at you. Before you have a chance to walk over, you're ushered to your seat and the conference begins.
And open your eyes. Hello, MFAX.
G'day guys,
Hiya.
how are we?
It is pumping in here. Look, thank you guys for getting into that and actually genuinely closing your eyes and leaning into that experience. Before we get into today's presentation, we want to ask you a couple of questions about what you saw in your mind's eye.
So hark back to that airport ad of the parent making the sandwich. Was it a mum? Was it a dad? Was it a same-sex couple?
Was the pilot that looked at you as you entered the plane, was that a male? Was it a female? Was it someone of colour? Was it a white person?
What about the couple that were checking in? Were they same-sex? First Nations? Potentially even differently abled?
And how about the taxi driver on the way to the airport? Male? Ethnic?
Finally, what about that CEO?
So as you can see, guys, just in 2 minutes, we can uncover some of our own unconscious bias. And that's what we want to talk to you guys about today.
Indeed. So, g'day, my name is Chris Coulter. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of Initiative.
Great crowd today.
This is my partner in crime, the yin to our yang, Sam Gear, our Managing Director. And as Sam said, we're here to talk to you today about unconscious bias. And this is a really important topic. And it's a topic that is more often than not reserved to talking about workplace culture and how we can create a more inclusive workplace. But we want to take it up a step and think about how do we actually lean into the effects of unconscious bias and how that impacts our media planning and the change that we create in the world.
But first, an acknowledgement. It is not lost on us too that we are two middle-aged white guys. Well, Colts is middle-aged, I'm eternally youthful. White guys up here talking about unconscious bias, something we have very little personal experience with. But that's exactly why we need to be having these conversations. This is a conversation for all. And this is the perfect forum, a day when we've got the entire industry from Sydney in one room, a moment to talk about and shine a light on this area.
And you know, as that immersive experience hopefully showed yourselves, like, you know, they're unconscious, it's unintentional, but it still exists. And the statistics back this up. Whilst we have progressed as an industry and as a society so much, and so many people can feel comfortable in their own skin, 61% of us still experience bias on a monthly basis. And frankly, that's not good enough.
So what do we do about it? Well, we love some alliteration in this industry. There's three things essentially that we can do. We can create awareness about this problem, awareness for ourselves through the experience we just had, advocacy, and action. Now, as a society, we're really good at the first two, particularly the second one. We love posting to social and talking about how much we care about stuff. But unfortunately, we often stop before we get to action.
And that, that's what actually excites me about working in this industry. We set up this today by talking about the fact that we are the changers, and we do. We are the changers. We go out there, we have a bias for action. Whether that is going out and creating a D&I council to actually, address these issues, whether it's creating industry pledges that pledges
Yeah.
that recalibrate corporate investment back into communities that have been too long forgotten. Thinking about the work we create, the conversations we have that bias for action. But we need to be really careful that that bias for action isn't in itself bias. And I think sometimes we can be guilty of not checking on ourselves and seeing the sort of influences that actually guide our media decisions and the change that we create in the world. And the more that we reflect on what our environment is, how we operate, the better and more inclusive the work that we will create. A graph that always gets my attention is looking at the general sort of population of the media and entertainment industry and where we all live. And if you can see in Sydney, we are very much anchored in this Anglo, inner city, delivery-rich sort of environment. And that has a profound effect, not just on how we see the world, but how we plan within it. Now that effect can be negative, but it equally can be positive, and it can guide the focus and areas in which we actually create positive change. And if we graphically represent this, it's amazing looking at this work on a page. But if you look down at the tail end of this graph, there are a significant amount of communities that represent as much, if not more, population size, but nowhere near the marketing and media attention. And frankly, that is something that we need to address.
So what do we do about it? The 3 A's, they're back. Today, as we said, too many stop here, we're going to take a step back in order to go forward. Yeah, we're going to shine a light today while we're all together in this moment, in this room, again on our own unconscious bias, to make ourselves aware of where those exists in a very, very quick live experience. Then we're going to talk about how we can translate that into advocacy and action, and we're going to talk about it with the D&I Council. So today we've created for you a live experience and simulation, which is essentially a wanky term for an online survey that we're going to get you to fill out, yeah? So look, it's been built based off some really key core principles, reputable third parties. I've looked at this. A couple of things for you guys to note, yeah, when we're taking this. A fast game is a good game. We don't want people sitting there thinking, oh, what should I answer? They're trying to trip me up. It's about your gut, not your head, yeah? Everything is anonymous, so don't worry. Just be honest and be fast.
You'll learn something about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So look, we're going to get into it. If everybody can pick out your phones, if you don't already have them in your hand.
All right, you have giant QR codes on the screen here. You should all be familiar with how to scan them. If you're up in the corners over there, your QR code is also on your badge, and that will help you access it. We need everybody to go into the web app, select the Awaken Your Unconscious section, and you're all going to be sitting in there waiting to be accepted into the group. And we're going to give people, the stragglers, a little bit of time to get into this. If you see someone next to you who doesn't have their phone out, who doesn't have the experience started, nudge them, because we want to use this captive environment to get as much data as possible, because these are going to inform action points for us to create change at an industry level.
Nice. We have 250 of you already in. Thank you, guys. Everybody else, we've got about 750 to go. It does look a little bit like the whole room is taking a picture of us, but it is just the QR code. All right, guys, so we're going to give you 5 seconds per question. Yeah, if we could all please remain silent, remain focused, because we're going to move through these really fast. Colts is going to yell out the question. I'm going to count us down to the next one. Let's do it.
All right, let's go, guys. I'm going to put on my best game show voice. So we're going to start off this and ask you a very simple question. How many people living in Australia were born overseas?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, how did we go? Let's see how many people got that right. Oh, well done. Round of applause, guys. Almost half the room, over half the room got that one right. Next.
Next question. What percentage of Australians' population is 50 plus?
3, 2, 1. How do we go? Let's see what the survey says. Ooh, okay, not bad. 75% of you got that wrong, so not great. Not great.
How many Australians identify as LGBTQIA+?
There's some confused faces. All right, how do we go? Ooh, it's okay. 85% of the room got that one wrong. Surprise, surprise.
All right. Think about the industry. How many of the media industry identify as LGBTQIA+? Is that different to the
Too
general
late to
population?
count. 5, 4, 3, 2, what did we go? Oh, well done. It's probably our best result yet, only 65% wrong.
What percentage of Australians live with a disability?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 700 votes in. Oh, well done. Well done.
All right, guys, we're halfway there.
Couple more to
Picking
go.
up pace. How many Australians are classified as neurodivergent? And for those that may not know what neurodivergency is, it's people that suffer from like mental thinking challenges. So think of autism, ADHD, some of those challenges.
Dyslexia, etc.
Dyslexia is another good one.
Answers in, please. Results. Ooh, okay. So 21%, that's 1 in 5 Australians are neurodivergent.
Okay. How many people working in media are from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds?
Called background, something we talk a lot about in this industry. How much do we know about our own industry? Answers, please, Survey Master.
It's really interesting looking at the live feed of this coming in.
Only 31% right on that one. Okay. Couple more to go, guys.
Okay. What percentage of the Australian population are classified as overweight?
Fast answers. 2 more questions post this, team. Thank you, Colts.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you should be judging yourselves. Yes. Supposed to be experts in audiences.
All right, a media question here, guys. What's the most efficient channel to rapidly reach Chinese Australians?
Easy one. This is media. Come on. Media for all. It's what we're all here for. Let's see how we went. Yeah. Yeah. Take a long, hard look at yourselves. That's...
All right, I want you each to think about yourselves, your personal experiences, and the agencies that you work at. Which of these communities have you, your agency customized media to specifically engage? Okay.
How do we go? Ooh, all of the above?
So all of the above, we have to select one right answer, and so that's not technically the right answer. It should be the right answer,
Yeah.
but...
We tripped you up there. Okay, last question, guys.
This is the last question. It's a special question, and it's one for us to just gauge a statistical standing point for us to think about what's the core area of focus that we need to take at an industry level to create change. So you're trying to find the single biggest gap. All of these are relevant, but what do you see as the number one biggest barrier to addressing inclusive marketing gaps moving forward? How can we include more of those audiences on the long tail of that graph that we shared
And
earlier?
as Colt said, we'll be taking action post today and delivering a report based on the results both here and in the Melbourne conference. Thank you, everyone who is voting. We've got about 100 to go. There we go.
There we go, guys.
A lack of awareness and insight. Give yourselves a round of applause.
So the quiz has commenced.
Please, please. Well done and thank you. Now, guys, as you can see, it's important we hold that mirror up to ourselves because we were off on almost every single one of those questions. To talk about a couple of those key areas, I want to welcome up for a really quick panel some of the DE&I committee. I'd like to welcome Joshua, Patrice, and Louisa. Give them a round of applause, please. Oh, we're loving it. Thank you for joining us, guys. Now, look, this is going to be a fast and furious panel. We've got about kind of 10 minutes to go on this stage, and I want to dig into some of those key areas. You know, we don't have time to go through them all, but I want to start with the LGBTQIA+ community. And Joshua, I know you're a passionate advocate in this space, so I'll start with you, mate. I think, and I'm going to ask a provocative question to start off. Sure. Okay. As we've seen, we over-index as an industry in this space. Do you think we are biased towards advocating for the LGBTQIA+ community due to our over-index as an industry?
Very good question.
Thank you.
I think to answer that, I almost need to take a step back and talk about the diversity journey that everyone's on, because I think when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion, everyone's on that journey. They might just be at different points, and that's totally fine. When it comes to the queer community, I think it's worth recognising that they've actually been on that journey for a really, really long time. And more so, they've also been really deeply intertwined with media as part of that journey as well, particularly through actually a lot of protest and discrimination. So if I think about kind of the two watershed moments in the last 50 years, those being the Stonewall riots in New York and also Mardi Gras in 1978 in Sydney, they were sort of broadcast media events that have really intertwined media and that community. On top of that, I also feel like the queer community has a really sort of beautiful appreciation for visual media as a means of expression and also as a means of protest. You know, you're walking down Oxford Street, you see some drag queens. It's a very visible kind of community, and I think perhaps that goes some way in explaining why we've been more willing to represent it in media, because it is visible. It might be a little bit more easy than other areas of diversity. That being said, I think there's a really big difference, to circle back to the question and to wrap this up, there's a really big difference between representation and advocacy. And when it comes to advocacy, I actually think there's such a long way to go, because the representation that we have championed has been pretty sort of single-minded in terms of featuring one letter in LGBTQIA+, that being the G. So a lot of the representation has been white, cisgender gay men, and there's a sort of a tremendous amount of work to be done for the other parts of that community as well.
Thank you for such a well-articulated answer. I think it's a really sensitive subject, as is
Totally.
all of these subjects, I think. And I think it's important to have these kind of conversations, as hard or as not hard, as provocative as they may feel. It's important to talk these out in the public forum, and I think you're absolutely right. I want to jump to the culturally and linguistically diverse community now, and I'll go to you for this one, Louisa. We saw some of the results up there. Apparently we're terrible media planners as an industry. We've done so much space. If you just have a look, this is not an ad for Think TV. This is not funded by them. I want to ask you kind of really clearly a question on this one, Louisa. Despite, almost half of our industry being from culturally and linguistically diverse audiences, we still don't seem to have a good idea of how to reach them in media. My question for you is kind of, why is that? Are we unintentionally racist by just thinking niche audience, niche platform? Or is it an unconscious bias?
I think that, so there's two elements to that question. The first is, well, first of all, great question. Are we bad media buyers? Do we actually just misrepresent our cultures? And I think we do. I think it's a lazy aspect of media buying. Just thinking that Chinese Australians only are on Weibo and not watching TV. I mean, me, myself, do I only watch Maltese news and Filipino news on SBS and that's all the media I consume? No, it's not. Like, it's everyone is multifaceted within their media options, and this is something we do know. I was reading that, because I'm such a nerd, I was reading the census data last night, and it saw that Australians now make up 50% of Australians are first and second generation Australians. So we are inherently a multicultural community. And this is something, again, we know. Our industry is multicultural. So just look at yourself, look at your colleagues, look at your friends, look at your family. And this is how we evolve and learn. And again, I just think that's a bit of a, I'm going to be controversial, it is a bit of laziness. Let's just remember how we actually plan and buy media. And I guess the second part of that question is, how do we actually reach this audience? And I'm not here to do a bit of a TED talk on how to buy media and how to plan and buy media. That's not what I'm doing. But who's really, really, really inclusive? Benaine Field. Who's really inclusive? Karen Nelson Field. Who's really inclusive? Brian Sharp. It's all those kind of standard planning principles are inclusive. It's all about reaching as many people in the category as possible. Again, knowing going into it, but let's reach as many people, no matter what their culture is. But what I'm not saying is that those niche publishers don't have a purpose. It's all about the context and the content we're in. So are we showing up in the right context with the right content we're showing them. What we don't want to do is across Lunar New Year just change our creative to something that's gold and red. That's tokenism. But it really starts with owned media, and that's for us to then challenge our clients and say, what's our actual purpose behind reaching this community? What's our purpose behind having a called element to the brief? Question your clients and say, what's the purpose here? What does your brand have to do with reaching this community? And let's do it in a proper way.
Yep, thank you. That is an exceptional answer from someone who reads the census at night. Yeah, round of applause. Patrice, I'm going to finish with you before we have a final comment section. I want to talk about the neurodivergent audience because it was another one where we didn't really know on there. And I want to talk about, as a media community, how can we customise our engagement for that community? We've all been a part of campaigns for Called where there's been language translation. Again, a really simple, customised engagement for a specific community. But we don't seem to take that thinking to other communities, particularly neurodivergence. There are really simple things like lowering the impact of our communications to kind of not shock people, or simple things like putting deaf captions in that are often overlooked. Why do you think that is, and what can we do about it?
I think that's really interesting because grouping together neurodivergence in itself is something that I guess is a standard thing to do, and when you're planning things you kind of group that in one thing, but neurodivergence in itself is an umbrella term for what it actually is, and something that could be completely overstimulating for one person could be something that calms another person down. So you can't really go through and cater to every single individual, but I guess that's something that as media planners we need to do to not so much find an overall fix for it, but figure out a new way that hasn't been done yet to be able to target differently abled people in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I find that is kind of, we are, as the MFA put it, the change makers, and we need to kind of figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah, it's difficult. You can feel like you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
I think, exploring that territory, going deep into it and actually understanding what is going to have an impact and what's also relevant for your client is really, really important, and not just doing it because we think we're supposed to. I'm going to finish on a final question, and I want fast and furious comments from each of you, please. And this was a question that came from our Melbourne event. So I want to read it out, and I thought it was really well articulated. Look, it's important we hold a mirror up to ourselves, not just you guys as an industry, but also ourselves having this conversation while we are having it, right? And to hold our own views accountable. So have we been guilty today of what's known as othering, and calling out specific minorities to focus on? In doing that, are we becoming the very problem we are hoping to solve for? Joshua, I'll start with you.
Oh, what a question, Sam. I think in an ideal world, in Nirvana, we would address people purely based on behavioural data and everyone would be treated the same. We know that that's not reality, and until that is reality, I think we need to do as much work as we can to understand all diverse groups better.
Thank you for sticking to your time limit. Patrice.
Mine is more so as coming from someone who represents like the disability section of it all. I personally love being able to relate to other people. So people in the audience who can relate to things that we've spoken about, it's like, yeah, like they feel seen. Whereas the other people who may not know what we're talking about, it's broadening their horizons and showing them that it's not just how their life is, it's other people's lives as well. Yeah. And it's kind of just giving that awareness that we really need to do. So I think it's not othering, it's just broadening.
Yeah. Fair. Finish us off, Louise.
Are we othering? I would say if you are not actively being inclusive, you are actively excluding. So we should all take that actual step and be inclusive. Take action. Yeah.
Take action.
Do the SBS inclusion course.
Yes, that is a key action. And look, it's a really good segue. We've got a couple of minutes left, and we didn't just want today to be about awareness and uncovering our own unconscious bias. That's an important first step, but as I said earlier, there are some other steps. So I'm going to leave you guys for 1 minute and bring Colts out of the darkness, if that's okay. Just for a couple of final slides for you guys. It can feel really hopeless in topics like this. It can feel like, how are we going to create change as an individual? But the good news is there is a cultural tipping point. And feel free to take pictures of this because you can use it in your own presentations.
Killer chart.
Oh, where are we? Yeah. If we can create advocacy and awareness as a media community, if we can create that out in the broader Australian community and culture and get ourselves to a cultural tipping point, which is 27%, if 27% of the population knows about this, understands it, we hit an accelerated adoption point that moves into the masses. So that gives us a real kind of tangible goal for each of these areas. Go out there, advocate, create awareness, and take action, because if we do it as a change-maker community that can actually have impact in the broader culture, we can achieve what we want to.
And look, we're going to create some other active steps to help out along the way, right? First and foremost, as Louisa said, do the SBS inclusion training. We should treat that like the MFA Digital Foundations course. We've got a 70% goal as an industry, and we're currently under 12%. That's piss poor, so we need to be better in that space. The DE&I Council are going to be creating inclusive media playbooks and workshops off the back of this to help us understand how we engage these audiences with nuance and actually, connect with them to create that strong resonance. And then finally, we have created the Diversity Directory. This is an industry wiki. It's a compendium of all niche publishers. The more that we co-contribute to that, the better that we're all going to have the toolboxes to reach these audiences and create the change and engage them in the way that we need to moving forward. So massive thank you to Sam and to our panelists and to you guys for listening to us. Enjoy the rest of today.
Thank you, team. Thank you, guys. Let's do it. Thank you.